Here's the 7400 IC emulated on the Teensy. I have it emulated here on the Teensy, Teensy 4.1, and I have the actual chip over here. I have them connected to Teensy. Control lines are here, the AB inputs, and they go over to the inputs of this one here. So whenever I push these switches, A, B on port 1, AB on port 2, AB on port 3, and AB on port 4, you'll see the blue LEDs are controlled by the Teensy, and the yellow ones are controlled by the actual IC. And you'll notice I've got these cheap ICs from Amazon, and some of these, I don't know if they're used from like a classroom setting or something, but the pins look like they're worn down and sort of copper colored where they were inserted and pulled out. And the port on this one, port 3, doesn't work, and I have it set up like bitwise, 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, 3, 4, however you read it. And same with this. This is A, this is B. Port 1, port 2, port 3, and port 3 is blown out on the actual chip. I checked all my wiring. It's obviously not the wiring, or else Teensy wouldn't read it. I replaced wires, I put new wires in, I made my own wires, and it's not the wiring. The only thing that's not connected to each other is the outputs, but I'm going to connect these. I'm going to connect wires from these LEDs over to the outputs from the Teensy, so that way when I hit this switch on pin 12, digital pin 12, which is not pin 12 on the Teensy. I think it's actually pin 13 on the Teensy. It's this pin here, digital 12, so it would be actual pin 13 on the Teensy if you're counting the pins on the Teensy, because the first one is actually ground, not 0. But this is that 7400 code I posted in the forum. I'm just using the cheapest parts that I can get, with the exception of the Teensy. And these things here. They're these roller switches. I've got 100K resistors on the LEDs, and I've got pull down resistors on the switches, because when I had the Teensy pull down, which is in the code right now, I gotta update the code. The resistors I don't think were strong enough to do all this, so I had to put 10Ks in there, and I'm using 1%, but you don't need 1%, just any standard value resistor. That's 10K, seems to work fine for me. And that's all I'm running with the Teensy. I've also got 16 megabytes on there. I cut out pieces of paper and stick them on there when I change and modify stuff, so I know which one's what. But just go over the pinouts. I don't have any pinouts drawn up. I disconnected the etch on the bottom side of the Teensy for USB power, so it has to be powered for it to be programmed. I think there's a way to do it with a Schottky diode, so it detects whether the power is coming from this here or not, but I can't solder that small. And the wiring here, these yellow and orange wires are going to the positive rail, which is 3.3 volts. Down Down here, the resistors are going to the negative rail, and the jumpers over here are just to the other side of the breadboard. This button will change the function of the Teensy from emulating a 7400 to actually reading the 7400. But I gotta connect those wires that I mentioned a moment ago, and I gotta program it because I just left it commented out in the code I posted, and I'll post a second post on the forums. Not a second post, but a continuation of that first post. I'll just reply to it, and I noticed there was a comment on how I can do it a simpler way, and I'll probably end up doing that, but I won't do that right away. I'll just post the code that I add to it, and then I usually do that. I usually do code a couple times, so that way I just do it, get it working, and then go through it and find out how I can make it smaller, faster, easier to use. But that's it. That's the wiring.